What was your worst experience from dating apps?
I matched with a goth girl who seemed really down to earth. Profile seemed normal and everything, so I swiped and we matched. Everything went well and we decided to meet at the park and walk our dogs. Her dog went to poop, so I handed her one of my baggies to pick it up. She bare-handed her dog's poop and carried it about 20 feet to the trash can and wiped her hands on the back of her jeans. I made sure not to let her touch me for the rest of the time.
I was catfished. I thought she was legit, and we talked for months. I went to go visit her, and it was a guy, claiming to be her best friend, and she had to run to pick up a friend who was drunk. The woman in the profile never returned, and he was trying his best to get in my pants.
She was heavily editing her photos using Facetune or whatever. At the date, we were talking and she just pulled up her phone and started mindlessly scrolling on social media. At that point I just stopped talking and she was like, yeah, you keep talking, I can hear you. The worst part is that I went to another city to meet up with her.
I matched with my oldest cousin's daughter that I hadn't seen for about 20 years. Didn't recognize her until we started talking, then we both had the same "God, this is awkward" moment when we realized the fact.
Went on a first date with a girl off Hinge. 5 minutes into the date, she was already talking about her past cocaine addictions and showing me her scars from attempting Unalive herself. She pointed to people at the bar and would be like, "I've gotten all of them to buy me drinks before," and then said that she couldn't wait to drain my wallet at fancy restaurants. At this point, I was very not into my date and was just looking forward to it being over. In hindsight, I absolutely should have just ended the date, but since there was food next door and I was hungry, we then got some food. At one point, we both went to the bathroom. When we both came back, our waitress said something like, "Oh, there you are. I thought you might have just left mid-meal." My date then nearly started a scene by claiming that the waitress was being racist at her for insinuating that we weren't gonna pay our bill. Luckily she relaxed, but then got way too relaxed and started to slightly loudly sing about her, and I quote, "hairy butthole." I really wish she hadn't done that. When we left the restaurant, she walked over to all the dinner tables and blew out the candles. When I asked why she did so, she said that she disassociated and couldn't remember doing that. Now, this would have been the perfect time to get the fuck out, but I was a pushover and let her convince me to swing by her house 2 to 3 blocks away to say hi to her cats before leaving. On the way there, she needed to pee and literally dropped her fucking pants and pissed all over the public sidewalk and her shoes. No hesitation. Just piss. I was speechless. I still can't believe how weird and uncomfortable the whole night was. The last insane part of the night was when, after seeing her cats briefly and then using the restroom, she attempted to naked woman me. It was so fucking awkward and she lost her shit when I clearly wanted to leave. She said, and I quote, "You're just going to leave me like everyone else in my life." So yeah, that's probably my worst.
I had a great first date with a girl from Tinder. She was super happy to set up a second date for later that week, and was sending me memes and chatting until the night before. The day of, she decides to stand me up in below freezing weather without warning. I was texting her asking where she was, and I could see her come online just to ignore me.
I met this girl on Bumble who seemed really sweet, and we clicked super well at first. She told me that she was stuck in a lease with her ex, who she broke up with a couple months before, but she was trying to move back in with her mother. I wasn't thrilled, but I was thinking, whatever, it's not her fault. A week later, I had lost my virginity to her, and a couple days after that I got a text from her telling me that she had a wonderful time with me, but that she realized she was still in love with her ex. Apparently, I made her feel like her old self, and that included being in love with a man who started dating her when she was 17 and he was 26. Stupidly, I gave her a chance to make up her mind, and she said she would pick me even though her brain told her not to. However, the final straw was that she insisted on staying friends with him, and that I was controlling for not wanting to date her if she would do that.
Matched with a girl, and not too long after they agreed to meet up and have coffee. Meets her at this cafe and she pulls out a tablet pretty much right after they sit down and order. She starts a presentation about some dodgy pyramid scheme. My poor mate was too polite to say anything. He sat through the whole thing, politely declined, and even paid for the bill. Never heard from her again.
I am widowed and dating again. It's difficult to use a dating app as I came from a time before when I did very well and there were no apps. I met a woman and we decided to meet in Starbucks in Barnes & Noble's bookstore, which is attached to a mall. The conversation is going well. We walk into the mall and she bumps into her ex. They start arguing and then hitting each other until they are fist fighting. There is a crowd now and security comes. I duck into the crowd and make a beeline to my car. She texts me later to apologize but comments why I didn't step in for her defense. I just said not interested and I block her response.
As always, it started with good banter via the app. I made a small penis joke which made her weirdly excited. Over dinner she tells me it's because she has a medically too tight vagina that could only accommodate a small dick, which sadly I lack. Date was over. I offered to drop her off at her place. Turns out she lived with her mom, not an indictment, but was not prepared to meet mom on the first date. But I do, and I'm feeling super uncomfortable, so I say my goodbyes, but just as I leave she starts feeling horribly nauseous. Turns out she's super lactose intolerant and was reacting to the cheese-based appetizer that she ordered. She also had an extreme fear of vomit, so she started having a panic attack. I offer to drive her to the pharmacy, and I'm telling you she had zero clue what to look for, didn't know what the word antacid meant or what Tums were, so I had to buy everything. I drop her off the second time and wait for the Tums to kick in before I got up to leave. I'm at the door, and she looks at me with genuine confusion and says, "But wait, you don't want to stay over? I was going to suck your dick." I said, "It's 3:30 a.m., good night." Next morning, I wake up to a million texts asking me if I liked her and why I was ignoring her. The whole experience made me realize how desperate I had been and how the apps played into that.
Matched with someone and agreed to go out after I got out of work. She was an hour late, texting me updates like running late, doing my hair, be there soon, etc. Shit happens, I can wait. Then she sent me a picture from outside the bar with my back turned, saying she was outside. I went to where the picture was taken and she wasn't there. Decided I was tired of being fucked with and told her I'm leaving, and she seemed disappointed. Told her I'd be down to try again, but nothing happened.
I had a guy steal my laptop and phone. We finished, he went to the bathroom and got dressed. He ran out and grabbed my stuff, which was right by the door, and ran. I learned my lesson.
Oh man. I have a few. I drove 2 hours to a date to get stood up by a salmon fisherman. A firefighter with a big Darth Vader tattoo, who was the spitting image of Jeffrey Dahmer, told me he couldn't get off in the bedroom unless I let him drag me around the house by my hair. A heavily bearded Jewish surfer met me for coffee and called me fat. I am not. A red-haired Russian man who continually referenced the Ukrainian uprising in disgust and carried a vintage six-shooter as his EDC nearly set his bedroom on fire with a candle while we watched Airplane and shotgun vodka. An alcoholic with a big hole right in the middle of his kitchen floor told me my Spanish was terrible. Granted, my Spanish sucks. I was stood up by a shredded engineer and had a short romp with a pile driver who insisted his cows were too smart to eat the poisonous plants that grew all over their field. There was a bodybuilder who told me that guns couldn't stop him from doing anything he wanted, that he was simply too strong to be affected by bullets. Then, icing on the cake, I got ghosted by a train conductor with a nose ring whom I had dated for 2 entire months. That joke writes itself somehow. That was a new low for me.
A friend of mine who is a journalist matched with a guy and started chatting. She didn't get his surname, so she couldn't Google him. He showed up to the date and looked very different from his pictures, alarm bells. She found out his last name and excused herself, went to the bathroom and Googled him. The first article that came up was from him being sentenced to prison for armed robbery. She was the journalist who wrote the story.
I was catfished. He took photos from strategic angles and lighting that implied he was taller and more muscular and lied about his height several inches. He ended up being a totally thin dude that weighed maybe 90 pounds and shorter than me. I think he was 5 feet 3 inches that didn't even live in the country. He was just visiting and he never mentioned it until the date, even though we talked for about 2 weeks. Also horrible driver, didn't speak much English, he was using Google to text and translate. I made do with Spanish since he mainly spoke Portuguese, but even then he was horrible at making conversation. It was absolute silence unless I asked something. Also, we get to the restaurant, he invited me for dinner and drinks and said he wasn't hungry and didn't want to drink, so I say fuck that, I'm eating cause I'm starving and I am inhaling my food so we can leave, but as I am just about done he says he's now hungry and would like a drink. Took about 4 trips of the server coming back and answering questions for him to just get the same drink and entree I ordered. At the end of the meal he said he forgot his wallet, then asked me if I wanted to get dessert afterwards and have a second date. Like, excuse me?
Years ago, matched with a girl on Tinder, hit it off, she rolls me to coke over because she has the house to herself. Excited, I get dressed, singlet and trackies because why dress up to dress down? And once I found her house and walk in, there's a place at the dinner table set for me with her family sitting around it.
Matched with a beautiful girl when normally I matched with girls who never showed their bodies in pics, so I was immediately thinking catfish. After talking for a few hours, she mentions recognizing me and later realized we graduated together and grew up less than a mile down the road. She totally knew it was me when we matched. Anyways, I looked her up in the yearbook and remembered who she was. I kept thinking, was I ever mean to her? Is this a trap? Because she was absolutely gorgeous now. Well, after a couple dates we really hit it off. Hung out every day for a month, literally fell in love, and went so far as to getting a marriage license in just over a month. 10 days later she broke it off. Talk about an absolute mindfuck. I've spent more days hurting because of it than we were together.
I remember meeting a girl I met on an app that looked nothing like her profile pic. I mean, it was her, but she looked so much better online, totally my type. In reality, she was a little, fat girl with green-brown teeth. No body shaming, but what do people expect when they use pics that don't align with reality? Another time I met this gorgeous girl. She wasn't exactly local, so she told me she would drive here and stay at my house. I was a little surprised, but I offered her to crash on the couch and didn't think much of it. We had a nice evening. She went to the bathroom, came back, and told me with tears in her eyes she will drive home now. Never heard anything from her again. Another time I met a beautiful Latina on Tinder while I was on a road trip with my sister in California. We are from Germany, and we met at our Airbnb. We sat in her car for hours and talked, and in the early morning she said she wished I had done something. So I kissed her and we hooked up. Then she left. That was 4 years ago, and we still talk sometimes. Then there was this chick that totally vibed with me. But her friends we met later didn't and talked her down, so she wanted me to leave BC. They wanted to go to a party and I wouldn't fit in.
I matched a really nice girl. We decided to go on a date. Restaurant, walk in the local park, then headed to her place. She seemed cute but a little esoterical, stopping to touch multiple trees that were emitting energy or something, insisted on taking a detour to the cemetery. But overall no serial killer vibes. Throughout the date she kept getting calls but never picked up her phone, making up some obvious fake story about it. We got along really well though, so I didn't think too much of it. When we got to her place she eventually picked up her phone. The mood changed immediately. She turned a little clandestine towards me and went on to give the person on the phone a physical description of me. After some really weird moments, she finally revealed to me that she is still kinda in a relationship while looking for people for a MMF threesome. Then it dawned upon me that the whole thing felt kinda scripted and I probably wasn't the first guy she did this to. Needless to say, I went through with it, but it was the weirdest sexy time ever.